Persperity Podcast. In the shadows we find our light. Through the struggles we will take flight. Healing hearts and mending minds. Together we'll leave the past behind. Welcome to Persperity Podcast, where hope is found. Voices rising up, breaking new ground. With every story shared, we grow and learn. In this journey of healing, it's our turn. Mindful moments equal prosperous lives. Oh yeah, mindful moments equal prosperous lives. Trauma whispers, but love will shout. In this space of trust, there's no doubt. We'll explore the depths of pain and grace, finding strength in every embrace. Welcome to Persperity Podcast, where hope is found. Voices rising up, breaking new ground. With every story shared, we grow and learn. In this journey of healing, it's our turn. Mindful moments equal prosperous lives. Mindful moments equal prosperous lives. Take a breath and join the ride. Together we'll walk side by side with open hearts and open minds. In this podcast space, true peace we'll find. Welcome to Persperity Podcast, where hope is found. Voices rising up, breaking new ground. With every story shared, we grow and learn. In this journey of healing, it's our turn. Mindful moments equal prosperous lives. Mindful moments equal prosperous lives. Persperity Podcast, a safe space for people healing from trauma. Persperity Podcast, a safe space for people healing from trauma. Persperity Podcast, a safe space for people healing from trauma.
All right. Hello, and welcome back to Persperity Podcast. Today's guest is Kristin Lenardson. And the topic today is nature versus nurture. Tagline where morality meets reality. As always, have to do the copyright disclaimer and have to go in with the mental health disclaimer. All rights reserved. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods. You may not reproduce, publish, display, perform, modify, create derivative works from, transmit, post, or sell any of the content without prior written consent of Destiny Smith or Persperity Podcast or the guest. Unauthorized use of this podcast may violate copyright, trademark, and other laws. To get into the mental health disclaimer, the information provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are experiencing mental health difficulties, please consult with a qualified mental health professional. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the podcast host or any other entity. All right. Welcome back to Persperity Podcast. Today we're tackling the timeless debate, nature versus nurture. Do our genes determine our moral compass, or are we shaped by the environments and experiences we encounter throughout life? To shed light on this crucial question, we're joined by Kristin Lenardson, a security executive with a wealth of knowledge in human behavior and risk assessment. Get ready for an insightful conversation that explores the intersection of morality, psychology, and real-world challenges we face every day. All right, Kristin, you want to take a moment just to share some stuff about yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the welcome. My name is Kristin Lenardson. I have been in the security industry for over 20 years. I was with the U.S. federal government for about 10 years, and I'm just delighted to be here today and to chat with Destiny.
Awesome. So, you ready to get into these questions?
Yep, let's do it.
All right.
I'm literally rolling up my sleeves. Okay.
Okay, so to clarify that nature, would you clarify that nature is genetics and biology and nurture is environment, upbringing, and culture? And do you think
I
that's influenced by behavior within the security field?
Yeah, I think those are the most accepted definitions of both of those. And within the security field, it's we look at behavior. So again, we try not to look at things that are try not to label people, try not to um cast aspersions on people. Profiling is such a bad word. So it's not really like, oh, you grew up this way, so you must be this. It's more, let's look at the behavior of that person and see if the behavior is a security risk or is problematic. And I feel like that's probably the most gracious way to take a look at it.
Mhm.
Instead of, assuming you're from this background, you're this, or, you've had these circumstances, so you're that. So I try to always encourage people to look at the behavior instead of looking at everything around it.
Okay, so to follow up from that question, do you look at a person's behavior in a behavior opposed to what they say to determine who that individual is, or do you like how do you approach that in the security sector to determine who
So
it is?
yeah, there's two things to that. So it is what people say, it is how they say it is the words they use, but it's also their actions. And are their actions aligning with their behavior? And is their behavior aligning with their actions? So if they say, I'm such a good person, I do all these wonderful things, but you notice that they're not helping their team or they're, slacking off during the day, then the behavior isn't really matching the actions. But there's also ways people say things. So, if you say something that is just kind of a regular colloquialism,
Mhm.
which everybody says every day, versus the wording they use around it. So, um, one of the this might resonate with your listeners. Colloquially in America, we say "go to hell," and we say it all the time, and we say it to everybody where we're thinking it. But if someone says something to the effect of, "I think you're going to burn in the fiery pits of Hades,"
Mhm.
technically, I said the same thing. But the connotation of the verbiage that I used, one is like an Americanism, colloquial, we say it all the time, every day. The other one has very, like, almost fire and brimstone, more biblical implications because you're talking about a specific place, you're talking about a specific action you want someone to do. And just the language is a little harsher. So it really is looking at what is said and how it's said, and then does that match up with the behavior of someone? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, that
Okay.
makes a lot of sense. Like,
Okay, good.
so how do you determine in like individuals aside from your job and in your personal life? How do you determine if I'm gonna say it in a slang term, the handshake is matching the smile?
Yes, that's a really good way to do it. And there's a couple of different ways to do it, and a lot of it is observing what they say and observing behavior. It's really hard to know immediately. It's really hard to just meet someone and be like, "Oh, I got them down." And you shouldn't do that, right? Because we're all like really complex people that our birth, our genetics, all these other things, how we grew up, what happened to us, our circumstances, everything plays into it. So it really does take time to kind of get to know someone or get a baseline. I was just interestingly, so there is this FBI negotiator named Chris Voss, and he wrote this book called Don't Split the Difference, Never Split the Difference. And one of the things that he looks at is he asks people, interestingly enough, like this, I was just listening to this morning. Um, who are three people you admire and why? And usually when you ask someone that and you just met them, first of all, it's a more interesting question, right? But
Mhm.
usually they try to say something like really important first, like I really admire, Muhammad Gandhi because he was such a peacemaker and he did this, that, and the other. And then they start to kind of like stretch for other examples of people they like I highly admire Michael Jordan. He was a fantastic, basketball player. He was not really a well known, he was not known to be a great teammate. He was known to be a great like individual player. He took his team to a lot of different championships, but he wasn't always the nicest guy, right? And then, they're kind of reaching for something else. So when you start kind of getting more in-depth conversation and getting more in-depth questions, and the more you kind of dig down of like, that's interesting, why do you think that, or why would that be, um people start to kind of reveal themselves. So there's really like two ways to lie, and it's like a bold outright denial,
Yeah.
right? But the other one is lie by omission, which means what are they not saying? So that's kind of another way to talk to people about their behavior and what they think, because you're kind of asking them, what, you know, they might outright deny something, but then the other thing is like, what is between the lines of what they're not saying? So does the shake, does the smile match a handshake? Sometimes that's kind of a little bit what you need to do to look for that, but sometimes it just takes time.
Mm. Wow, that's good. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. So next question: does biology play a role in aggression, risk taking, our ability to handle stress, and what are the crucial? And I'm sorry, and which are crucial in security roles?
Um, yes, and everything. Oh, these questions are so complicated. Yes and no. I don't necessarily think it's biology. I think it's more training and experience.
Okay.
I think that uh, I I love pit bulls. I love them as dogs. I think they're amazing. I think a lot of people are afraid of them because they have a bad connotation around that breed. They think that breed is dangerous. They think that breed is aggressive. No, it's not the breed. It's the way that we're socialized.
Hmm.
I've seen pit bulls that are the most loving, best family dogs ever. But some people will never own them and they're banned at some locations because they're afraid of what the breed can do. So I think it is more nurture in that respect. And I also think that these are skills that you can learn. You can learn to have self-compassion. You can learn to deal with stress. You can learn to have better coping skills. Now, if you have if you have any sort of blocks to that, or you're thinking, oh, I had this happen to me, so I'm never going to be good at that. These are things that you can learn to get better at. Like, I used to be very impatient, but I do a lot of meditating. I'm not good at it, but I try. But I think there's a lot of things, and then experience also. So the more experience you have with something, you're like, okay, I know what this might look like. I know how I probably should react in the situation. And then also age and just learning. So a lot, again, experience, all those things kind of tie into it.
Fine. Okay. Um, that's good. So, are there any neurological factors that contribute to ethical decision making in critical moments?
Here's the thing. I am not an expert on like the neurodivergent spectrum. And I know some folks that are on the spectrum have more of a tendency to not pick up on social cues. And for example, I have a family member who is on the spectrum, and a little bit difficult sometimes to pick up on cues with other people around them. They really don't prefer loud, noisy environments. That distracts them from kind of keeping those social cues front of mind. If there's a lot of chaos or a lot of things going on, they tend to get irritated. Again, I am not the expert. So I think that there are, again, I think it can be a learned behavior. And I think that you can unlearn things also. Of I wasn't good at, paying attention, or I wasn't good at picking up on these clues, but here's some tricks that, or here's how I've learned to kind of be more patient and study behavior better and pick up on these things.
Mhm. So, for our listeners and the viewers,
Yes.
what is your educational background?
Oh,
And
yeah, you have a much better educational background than I do. I just have a bachelor's in criminology. So that's pretty much all I've done. And then everything else I've done throughout the years, I've picked up through either certifications or work. I've got a lot of on the job training, is what I like to call it. So just, years of experience and learning. And honestly, I learn by messing things up. And I'm like, oh, that was bad. I never want to do that again. How can I change for next time? But again, it's kind of being introspective and critical of myself to say, I didn't handle that situation well. How can I handle it better in the future?
I was like, Chris Cole, you're like one of the coolest people I know.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank you.
there's
Thank you. I
people
appreciate that.
with bachelor's degree that haven't even touched the places that you have touched or even stepped in the places you have. So don't even downplay it like that. Like, oh my
Thank
God.
you. I appreciate it. But it's a lot of on the job. It's a lot of years of experience. So if you combined my experience, I should have like 7 doctorates by now. I just haven't paid for them. So
Exactly. It goes to show that you are a person can do anything they put their mind to, regardless of what circumstances it may be. It's just getting
yes.
yourself into those rooms,
Yeah.
making those mistakes. So
Yeah, and that's quite a lot of it over time.
mhm. Okay. Like, is there anything you would like to share that throughout your experience, well, your career experience or your life experience that the viewers can, educate themselves on when it comes to interactions with people?
Um, being a parent is a really good is a really good way to interact with people, and that will drive your frustration. But honestly, I think everyone dealing with family, dealing with people that you love that are close to you, having children, we all have parents, we all have, family members and things like that. I think we all, to an extent, get frustrated by the people that are closest to us. And we love them, but we don't always like them all the time. And I think that that's always a really good indicator because those people will push your buttons fastest. They will push your triggers fastest, quicker than anything else, because they know you so well. And I think that one of the things that I'm still working on and struggle with is when my triggers are pushed of, you know, taking a step back and not letting that happen, or taking a step back and realizing it's happened, and all of those things. Are there specific courses? Are there specific, things you can do? Absolutely. It just depends on what you're into. I mean, spirituality also, obviously, understanding psychology, understanding interpersonal relationships, things along that nature. I think anything that, honestly, if you have a growth mindset, is kind of the first step, right?
Yeah. Because I want to say, like, when I got my criminal justice degree, I had a criminal major in criminal justice, minor in psychology. One of some of my biggest challenges with that was like learning the profiling and learning to psychoanalyze, and
Yes.
putting them both together. They just go head in head because it's just like it's a contradiction in itself. Because it's like, okay, if I'm profiling this person, I'm looking at all these different. I'm looking at the MO. I'm looking at how your behavior is doing this and that. But in psychoanalyzing, I'm trying to make this educated guess
Mhm.
to what you may be diagnosed with, what your challenges may be. And I find that to be exhausting on that end. And I find it to be exhausting a profile. So with having that, like those degrees, like did you have a minor or did you
My
just
minor was in Japanese language and culture. So, yeah, my minor was like completely not related to what my major was in. So, yes, I did, but it wasn't close. I understand what you're saying. You're trying to reconcile the two things in your brain because in classical, like, security, criminology, things like that, they say, okay, well, if you remember the Washington sniper, the Washington DC sniper years and years ago, traditionally FBI profiled lone white male. That's who they profiled. Like, that's who the sniper is. That's who the active shooter is. That's who's going to commit these crimes. They were completely wrong. It was an older Black gentleman, African American gentleman, and a young man that he kind of recruited. And so they spent so much time chasing the profile instead of looking at the behavior and looking at the clues because they were so right that this was the profile. And so you really have to understand the history of what you're doing. Understand that is the history, but then it's a black swan. I mean, and a black swan is something that poofs out of nowhere. And, like nobody ever flew a plane into a building until 9/11. That was a black swan event, and it was a cataclysmic black swan event. So just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't happen. So you can't get pulled in so far to the bias and then of what you should be profiling for, but then also with psychology, you want to feel like you're doing a great job and like you're diagnosing this person properly and everything else. But again, everyone is so different, so they might have symptoms of one issue, or one mental diagnosis, but they might also have sprinkles of other things in there too, and you still have to take all that into account. And then something really traumatic could have happened to them that you don't even know about yet, that's kind of driving something else in them. So it's understanding the totality, and they say in the law, totality of circumstances. So what are all the things around it? Who is the person, but what's the context?
Mhm.
And then what's their behavior? And then you still have to kind of like look at all those things and reconcile them all together. So the nature versus nurture is just not easy. And I don't think it's fair to focus on just one or the other.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Because, like, despite the fact of having a criminal justice, well, my major being criminal justice, my minor being psychology, my background, my first major was journalism.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm right back in that sector. We're doing the podcasting, and like I've had people ask me, like, "You're all over the place. Like, you've done many different things. You interned here. Yeah, you're interested with this." And I'm like, I have a huge passion for psychology, but I love law. I love knowing my rights. I love being able to, understand myself as I'm learning. Because I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna get back to the questions. When I got my degree when I was in school, and I share this with you, that degree inside of those walls was for me. Everything
Mhm.
that I learned on that page, from taking psychology courses all the way to criminal justice courses, was for me to identify behaviors that I may, you know, I may show, or better yet, like things I may misunderstand in individuals, instead of applying it to how can I always reprimand an individual, how can I always psychoanalyze an individual, or it just really was for me. But when I graduated, that was for everybody else. I was
Yeah.
always reminding myself to always apply that for myself, but knowing that what I got the degree in was to make sure that other people are safe, and making sure that they feel that I am qualified for where I stand in, which made me realize I didn't want to sit down and be a psychologist. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I was like, there's no way I'm going to sit across somebody. Kudos to the people that do it. But I was like,
Yes.
wait, I'm going to go and get this degree in cyber psychology. And when I found that degree, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Technology and psychology. Come on.
Yeah,
Next level.
exactly. The two things together are very cool, but you've got the baseline so you understand what it is. And also, part of life is process of elimination, finding out what you don't like, right?
Yeah.
And you ended up doing that through the process. So that's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah, so let's get back to these questions. So, how
Okay.
do cultural norms and societal expectations shape a security professional's understanding of duty, ethics, and the use of force?
Oh, I'll tell you how they should, but I can't tell you that they absolutely do.
Come on.
Um, so I was with the FBI, which is like the totally different. It's just it's a very old agency. It's very traditional. It's very conservative, and it's Federal Bureau of Investigation, but it's also fidelity, bravery, and integrity, which means everything you do every day, you have to have the fidelity, the honesty of what you're doing. You have to have the integrity and the moral values and ethics to perform your job. And then, you have to have the bravery. I did those out of order, sorry. I spelled fib. Okay, wow. So maybe Freudian slip. But you have to have the bravery to do all those things and do, like you do the job, but also like have the bravery to stick to your guns and know that you are ethically and morally in the right place to be the person to make these decisions. And so I think a lot with law enforcement, military, government, security industry, a lot of people that do it because we fundamentally want to come in and like protect people, protect our nation, protect whatever we're kind of doing, our communities. The security industry is interesting. It is a lot of military, government, law enforcement folks. Um, but there's other parts of the industry that are just people who are like, well, this looks cool, I'll do it. And you're like, okay, that's not the right reason to do it. And it's kind of the we call it the cool guy syndrome here, where they're like, oh, I'm gonna kick doors and I'm gonna put cuffs on people and I'm like, that is not, if you do everything right, you should never have to do that. If you're doing your job the right way, especially in security, you should never have to be in a situation where it is threatening, because you kind of like assess the risks in an intelligent manner and you understand how to mitigate them before you even get there. So when people are like, oh, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and the one of the movies years ago, so I was the president of an international organization called the International Protective Security Board for several years, and we had conferences, and this is for bodyguards, right? And for close protection, executive protection, individuals worldwide. And so we played a movie like during the conference, and a snip of the movie, and the movie was The Hitman's Bodyguard. And in this little like 3-minute scene, Ryan Reynolds was, who's, a wonderful actor, but was running up the stairs and was, bouncing people off walls and punching people and zip tying people to the stairs and, fighting his way up the stairs to get to the person he was supposed to protect. And as we're playing the video, a lot of the audience was probably about 90% male, and they were all cheering, and that's cool, and I want to do that, and blah, blah, blah. Then we stopped the video, and then we had a insurance specialist and a prosecutor come up. And the prosecutor was like, here's the 44 crimes I'm going to charge you with if you do anything in that video. And the insurance specialist was like, and here's how probably your liability insurance is going to go up, and you're going to lose your job because not only are you going to be in prison, but you're never going to be available to maintain or ever get insurance for your position ever again. So it's this thing of like, that looks cool, I want to do it. But then the reality is, use your brain first, and so in the security industry, I would like to say that a lot of, I would say 98, 99% of the people are here for the right reason and doing it for the right reason. But there are some people who are like, well, that's cool, I'll just do that. And it's like, that's not the right motivation for the job. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. You
Okay,
did.
good.
I was gonna ask them, like, some people think that the security, in that area is just all about the movies. It's like Beverly Hills Cop. It's always the cop that goes rogue, or the detective goes rogue, or the security guard is just doing this and that. And I don't know. I used to think that too, but it just sounds like it's all over the place.
Yeah, and you've seen what happens when cops go rogue. They go to jail,
Yeah.
and they should,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So you don't get to go rogue anymore. You don't get to make up your own laws. You don't get to, fly by the seat of your pants. What was it? I'm the law. Like, no, no, you're not. Like, so, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and you still see it in the field because there's a lot of ego, involved in having authority. So, yeah.
Yeah. How do you tame that, if that's the right word to say it? Like, not having ego with the leadership, the amount of leadership that you have, the amount of control that you have.
Um, Realizing that I'm doing it for other people, realizing that I'm actually in a service industry. I'm in a service industry. My job is to serve the people that I work with, serve the companies that I work with, serve the assets, make sure that I'm protecting other people. And so with that, I used to have a badge with the FBI. So I had official authority. In the private sector, working for companies, working for private people, you do not have legal authority. You no longer have military authority or government authority or anything along those lines. So you just have to come in, and it's more bridge building, it's more networking, it's more making sure that people know that you're there to help them.
Mhm.
And that's how I get my job done now. So have I had an ego over the years? Yes, of course I have. Has it gotten me in trouble over the years? Yes, of course it has. But when I come back to my fundamental principles of like taking care of people and protecting people and protecting the organizations that I work for, then that's the most important thing. And so that's kind of how you take yourself out of it, of you're there you're in the service of
Mhm.
other people.
So, what is the biggest security team that you have been over?
I had about 90 on my team at one point in 6 different countries. Yeah, so very, very diverse. Was in, had all different types of religion, had all different types of ethnicities, had all different types of, sexualities. And so, just making sure that the team all still felt like a team at the end of the day was I don't want to say one of the biggest challenges, because they were all really fantastic to have on my team, and they were really, really great professionals. Even the more junior folks that came on the team, just really great professionals wanting to do a good job. But we all kind of had the same mindset of, we're doing this work to, help other people. So
That is cool. You try to downplay yourself. That is so cool. That
Thank
you did.
you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've done some cool things. And then other days I'm like, I put my left sock on my right foot and I'm like, okay, I give up, so it is what it is.
I don't know about you. I'll be like, my mom's a superhero if I was your kid. Just saying.
He's great, but thank you. I appreciate that.
But that also goes to my next question. Like, how did we meet?
Oh gosh. We met both volunteering for a nonprofit. And that's kind of how we started talking. And you came in, and what I noticed about you right away is you had a drive for leadership. And you actually ended up really, really, really helping me with the first task that I kind of had with this organization because you were so on it. I was just so impressed. And so the intent was to, work with some interns, and you ended up kind of cat wrangling a lot of projects and people and all the things, which I very much appreciated. So I noticed right away that you had that leadership ability, but you also had drive. So that's how we met.
Like, I would say I was like, my interaction based off of that was like, okay, look, I was was it cut no corners? Is this
Yes.
straightforward? Just like, hey, this is just what it is. When I first met you, I was instantly like, after I got off the video chat, I was like, oh my gosh, is she gonna take me the wrong way? And then we had a conversation.
Oh, no.
You
But I
shared
can
with
see
me.
how you would think that. Okay, yes. I was not completely organized during our first meeting. I will completely admit to that. I was a
No,
little
it
flying by the seat of
wasn't
my
you.
pants.
I'm saying me because I was
Oh, okay.
this is what I need. This is what I want. This boom, 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 boom. Cut no corners. Boom, just give it to you straight up. And I noticed you were like, okay, okay. It was like you're kind of backing up. And I'm like, okay, I was probably a lot. Then we had that conversation and you were like, yeah, you just like, you don't take no stuff. You just
You
like,
don't, but that's good because honestly, and that's the way I prefer to do it. I can be very political and careful and, make sure that I'm smoothing edges and doing all those things. But honestly, I prefer to just like, let's just talk. Let's just be honest. Let's just get things done because there's a lot of time is kind of wasted on niceties at times, which is lovely. And it's still a way that you have to do it. You still have to be able to, um, it's not even playing the game. It's just professional courtesy. It's just all of these things until you get to know someone and then you can be like, okay, here we go, and figure out how they work. And then you can work with them how that makes most sense. So,
yeah, I just thought it was funny. Like you gave it to me straight up of who I was, and I was like, yes. I was like, I'm not even offended, but also at the
okay,
same time,
good.
like, okay, like she didn't take me any other way besides, look, I'm about my business. Let's get straight to it. Let's just boom, But I started loosening up afterwards.
You
So,
did. You did.
you
Very
know,
much so, which is
um,
good.
let's get to these other questions.
Okay.
What role does formal training, ethical guidelines, and ongoing professional development play in shaping a security professional's decision making?
All of that is so the ethical guidelines are all of those are completely evolving all the time because technology is evolving, because the laws are changing. And if you just think about privacy laws, if we talk about TikTok, if we talk about social media, and you look at the privacy laws across the US, you look at GDPR. So these are things that you constantly have to stay on top of, and you constantly have to have the ethical um, like accountability and the stringency to understand like these are things that are changing and I have to keep understanding it because if you don't, it damages your career, it damages your reputation, and it can actually damage the company or the organization that you're working for because you didn't understand something properly. And ignorance is not bliss in security. If you don't know it, you need to learn it and you need to understand the implications of it because there's some legal and regulatory things in the US and you're like, okay, that's, not too big of a deal. In Russia or China, you go to jail. So you really have to understand what these different measures are. If you violate GDPR laws in Europe, you might not be able to work there. So it really does come down to your livelihood, but also you want to make sure you're in the best position to protect the people around you, and the people that you're tasked with kind of taking care of and the organizations that you're tasked with taking care of. So if you don't understand something, you lose credibility.
Okay.
So again, growth mindset is probably the best tool you can have.
That's good. I'm sorry, I left because you was like, you can go to jail.
You can totally go to jail.
What you
Yes, it's a thing.
yeah. That was a really great question. Like, and just to elaborate, because there's some people, some young people out here just like, oh, I really want to do this and that, but they don't understand that it's all about mindset. It's all about integrity and discipline. So that's really good.
Yeah, and also, I mean, one of the other things that I would say to your younger audience who's wanting to get into different careers, like you don't have to share everything on social media. You don't. I mean, post a third of the stuff less
Mhm.
of what you think you could post. Because when I was growing up, we did not have all those things. And so I probably would have gotten in trouble for more things that I did. Um, but luckily, but now everyone kind of posts everything. And once the cat is out of the bag, you cannot put the cat back in the bag, period. And so, if there's anything out there that is going to not look good, or even, God forbid you said something to a romantic partner and they use it inappropriately, that damages your reputation, and that damages your decision making. How I look at it as a hiring manager and employer, like, have we all done stupid things? Yes. Have we been, um, people that abused our trust? Um, could they use, things in different ways? Absolutely. But it really comes down to your decision making, and it comes down to, you know, me questioning, how are you going to treat my company's information? How are you going to react if you don't like something and it goes on social media? But you can think of it the same way as like the police officers that wear body cameras. You know, they have to be super careful with what they do all the time too, because that stuff will also go viral. So it's just having more accountability and understanding that your actions do have real consequences, and they might not have consequences today or this year, but they might have consequences in like 5 years or 20 years if you're going for a president position, right?
That's good. That's really
Yeah.
good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
My next question is, how do personal experiences, including trauma, shape a security professional's worldview in their response to threats?
So trauma just in general makes you hypervigilant. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Insecurity, that's a good thing, right? Because we want to be like, what's going on? What's happening? Um, but it can also be exhausting.
Mhm.
So there's kind of like this military, like coded, you're supposed to be in a mental mindset. Like white is like maybe you're sleeping. Okay. And I'm going to get the colors wrong, but it's kind of like a white, orange, um, white, blue, orange, red, right? So different levels. And then blue might be like you're sitting on the couch with your family, like nothing's probably going to happen, no big deal. And orange is like orange is kind of like maybe you're out at a bar and something's getting weird, you're paying attention, things like that. And red is, super vigilant, like you're worried about something happening or something's already been happening. And then I think black might be like the most critical one, like the highest step. And that means like you're in combat, like you're in a combat zone, everything is, totally crazy. So, but it takes a toll on your nervous system, and it takes a toll on your anxiety long term. So little bits of stress are good, and they can be controlled, and you can use them as your superpower of like, I know how to deal with this. I've been in this situation before. And it helps you be more vigilant. The other thing is it also helps you understand, like I've been in some really bad situations. And so knowing like I was in those really bad situations and I got through those really bad situations helps me with my mindset of like, if I'm in another bad situation, I'm like, oh, I've been through worse than this, you know? But at the same time, it can also cause anxiety. It can also cause sleeplessness. It can cause a lot of other, mental and health disorders, as you know. Um, so it can be a blessing and a curse. It's really understanding when to turn it on and when to turn it off. I mean, you don't want to be like super rigid and looking around as I'm just in the office today. That'd be so weird, right? Um, and it would freak out everybody around me if I'm like constantly like looking around over my shoulder, all this thing. It just I look like a weirdo, right? But also I know this environment. Like I already know where the exits are. I know what the regular day should look like. I know when something's regular, when something's not regular, and when something's not regular, then I can pay more attention to it. So it is really kind of understanding how trauma has affected you and how it makes you feel
Mhm.
and where you're feeling it. Some people call it their spidey sense, you know? So again, it can be a pro or a con.
So with that spidey sense, I have to jump in and ask this question.
Yeah.
Some people, with the nature versus nurture thing, some people get this feeling that have gone through trauma, and I tend to have it myself, where we get this, we be like, something's off.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of times, is it the truthful way, like on a sense of, okay, because I went through trauma, I'm gonna respond to this in a natural instinct of, okay, this is too good to be true, I want to deal with it, or opposed to a fact of this is not real. You understand what I'm coming from with that?
Yeah, it could be again, it could be either or. I don't know if you've looked up kind of like the attachment theories and things like that. So depending upon again, like how you were as a child and how you grew up and everything that you've gone through, again, those could be good or bad things. You could be reacting to a trigger of
Hmm.
something that either you consciously or subconsciously happened to you before. So even though you don't always, because trauma sometimes gets blocked, right? People don't always remember their trauma. Trauma is your brain's way of going, we're just going to turn this off for right now because we're going to focus on some other stuff. Because your brain's hurt, right? Like, so you know how someone is maybe gets in a bad car accident and then they go into a coma.
Hmm.
This is the way I kind of think about it. Your body is shutting down things that it doesn't need to do because it's so damaged that your body's like, you know what? We don't need to walk right now. We don't need to talk right now. Let's just lay here and concentrate on breathing and healing. And I feel like sometimes trauma kind of gives you that too, where trauma can be like, I'm just going to shut this part down so we can deal with other stuff, so we can still go through our day and go to work and pay our bills and things like that. But I do feel like it can be a bit of both. And again, it can be your spidey sense because something happened before, or you could be hypervigilant because you've had trauma. And knowing which one is which,
Hmm.
is it causing you anxiety? Is it causing your stomach to hurt in a certain way? Does this feel familiar? So I think kind of analyzing, again, and I'm not an expert, but analyzing how does this feel and why does this feel familiar or what feels off. Sometimes though, you've just got, if it's a really bad situation, you've just got like seconds to figure it out. So you don't always have enough time to analyze. But I'd say in situations where you feel something is like a little weird, you can think a little bit more about maybe why.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. So with the next question, can past experiences lead to biases or predispositions that impact decision making in any field of study?
Absolutely. And this is just history shows us this, right?
Mhm.
Um, I'd say when again, even going back to pit bulls, you know, let's just use because it's a dog and they're cute. So let's just use them as an example. Um, you know, people see a scary muscular dog and they've seen like portrayed in the movies or they've seen, stories about pit bulls and all these things. So there's an inherent bias against a dog because of the way the dog has been portrayed or the stories that have come out about the dog or things like that. But it's the whole their bias is against the whole breed as opposed to maybe my friend Mandy's dog, who's called Buttercup, who's like adorable and she's like cute and she dresses her in little bows and dresses and stuff and she's a pit bull. So people's background and what they've been socialized to and then also the experiences they've had um will definitely stand up that bias, but it's again it's really having the growth mindset and the internalization to say, is it every pit bull or is it just the bad pit bulls? And I'm not talking about the rapper, because I do like his music too. But yes, you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So, can empathy and compassion be effectively integrated into security work or anyone's work without compromising safety?
Yes, and it actually has to be because security can be a thing. It can be a gate, it can be an access control card, it could be an alarm, but security is also a feeling. So if someone does not feel safe and secure, then that's just how they feel. And I can't tell them they do or they don't. It's subjective. So in some places you feel safe and secure. In other places you do not feel safe and secure. And it doesn't matter how many, you might be at the airport standing next to a guard who is holding an assault rifle. And that might not make you feel safe and secure. That might make you feel on guard. That might make you feel nervous. I've been in different countries around the world and in different environments, and it's like sometimes too much security makes people feel less secure. They're like, "What's wrong? What's going on? Why is it like this?" And also, empathy is really important, because if someone tells me that they're worried about something and they don't feel secure, then you have to do it. So years ago, working with, individuals and corporations that either have, a death in the family, or there was one organization that I worked with, and the woman was in a bad marriage, and she was one of our employees, and her husband was actually a police officer. And, her managers knew that she was not in a great marriage, and she told her friends and some of her close coworkers and things like that, I'm worried about this. If anything ever happens to me, he probably did it. And she was getting divorced, and she dropped off her children with a family member and went to go see him for the last time. And and uh, and no one ever saw her again. And he was a police officer, and he actually did kill her. And we had to have a different police department, not the one he was on, obviously, because of bias. We had to have a different police department investigate everything. And he did it. And we turned over documentation, we turned over computers to the other police department, the other law enforcement department. And they found she had documentation of documentation of documentation from her psychologist, from her lawyer, from all these things, a document that was like, I'm afraid he's going to kill me. And in that respect, it's you have to have empathy, because now it's a security situation that went really, really, really wrong. It's a situation where, her coworkers are now very upset. The company's very upset. You have to be able to look at people and then decide kind of what they need in the moment too. I have folks that come to me, with personal stuff, just because I am a security expert, and they're like, well, what about this or this? What could I do? And so, again, I have to look at it as this no person is no longer my coworker. This person is an upset parent, or this person is, having a hard time with their neighbor. And so it's always understanding what's happening behind it. And then also, again, we talked about profiling, but there's like a means and motivation behind things of why. You look at the behavior, but why are they having that behavior? And you know this from psychology, right? Why are they doing this behavior? What might drive them to that behavior? And sometimes you don't know, but you have to come in with a lot of empathy to say, okay, maybe they are having the worst day possible. Maybe their parent just passed away, and you have to look at this and say, maybe he's being a jerk and he yelled at his manager today, but maybe he just really did have a really bad day, and this is not typical for his behavior. So there's the security component. I mean, I could put doors and locks and alarms and cameras all over the place all day long, but if the people don't feel secure and they don't feel safe and they internally like aren't feeling it, then I'm failing at my job.
So from a non-security point of view, you're hitting on some stuff that a lot of viewers and listeners are needing to hear. Like, it goes like it definitely applies to when you're having personal relationships as well. If someone is not feeling secure and you're having all these different feelings, it's always important to stop and try to understand where you are in the situation and to communicate. That's what it sounds like. Everything that you're saying is narrowing down to the fact of communication and how it's important on how you communicate, and that it all just follows together. The tone, the actions, the word choice,
Yeah,
and how you respond to it.
exactly. And some people, when they get scared or when they're anxious or when their traumas arise, they don't always know how to effectively communicate.
Mhm.
Um, sometimes people need to shut down for a little bit. Sometimes people need to chat things out. Sometimes people need to write things down. Sometimes they need to go for a walk. So it's understanding kind of what you need in those situations, but then how do you effectively communicate and what makes you most comfortable. But then sometimes you do have to push, yourself out of your comfort zone to get the communication across. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That is for sure. Oof. Um, are there hormonal differences between genders that influence moral judgments?
Women are superior. No, no. Overall, no. I mean, anybody can do anything, and I think that honestly, I think that I'm I don't mean to sound flippant about this, but I think that everyone is kind of is like on a spectrum of gender. Like I have a lot of masculine qualities, but I have a lot of feminine qualities. And depending upon what I need and what the situation is and just who I am from day to day, sometimes I have to be a little bit more stern. I have to be a little bit more direct. And sometimes as a woman that comes across as pushy or bitchy or what have you. And other times I can be super empathetic and I'm sitting at my desk trying not to cry, and I don't think that there's different inherent, anything on a gender that makes one person better for it or not. I think it also kind of comes down to how you relay yourself to people and how you come across to people. And sometimes people need different things at different times. It is actually like being a parent quite often. Sometimes you got to yell at your kids. Other times you're like, oh my gosh, let me put a boo-boo on your knee. All the things. So it just depends upon the circumstance and the context. But I don't think that there's one gender that's necessarily better in security than another. Now, if you will see a lot of security guards, you will see a lot of bodyguards, you will see a lot of men in security. Traditionally, it has been a male dominated field. I happen to know a lot of really amazing, smart, strong, gorgeous, brilliant, tough women that do it too. But a lot of it is still, folks coming out of the government, military, law enforcement, which also has been traditionally male. So I think our stats are skewed a little bit, but I wouldn't say that one gender really has um, any sort of, one up on another. I think it's learned behavior.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. How might evolutionary pressures have shaped our moral instincts?
Oh
And
gosh,
I'm
going
gonna,
from caveman time of just I'm going to survive to now I have to go to an HR
Away
meeting.
from
Yeah,
loudspeaker
huge,
reminder
huge.
notifications.
oh, sorry.
That's okay. No, huge, huge different things. I think evolutionary, it's the more um, the more you have to work in a collaborative field, the more you have to work with people. You have to pick up on the social norms, and you do have to put your time in and understand the politeness and the reverence for other people and the empathy for other people and things like that. If I'm in the battlefield, then it's survival. Like we're all working together to survive. And I want to say sometimes in the office it feels that way. No, I'm just kidding. Not where I work now, but other places I've worked, sometimes you just feel like I just have to survive. But again, like evolutionary, like we depend upon each other. I trust other people have to do their job, so I'll do my job and all the good things together.
So when you said survival to the fittest, like, does that have any moral implications?
Survival of the fittest. I think I don't think it has moral implication. I think it has like kind of like a more, I don't know how to phrase it. Like a more old-fashioned perspective of like only the toughest are going to survive. No, the smartest are probably going to survive longer than the toughest. Unless you're lactose intolerant, you can't eat cheese and there's only like dairy left. I mean, so I think it really comes down to it's not necessarily survival of the fittest. I think it used to be that way. I think it's now survival of the smartest and survival of the most resilient and adaptable.
That's good. That's good. I got
Yeah.
a few questions for you. I feel like it's so many things I can ask you. I know, time. But I have so many questions for you. I'm gonna limit them. So
Okay.
so we can put it into the podcast episode. Um, but how do early childhood experiences such as attachment styles and parental relationships shape moral development?
Okay. Again, I am not an expert, but from what I've seen, and I don't know if it's necessarily shapes, I think it shapes your cognitive development and it shapes your relational development. Um, Unless you see your parents like committing crimes or um you're born into like a mafia family where it's just kind of expected that you're going to do that. Again, I kind of think it's a little bit like the going back to the pit bulls. All puppies are born puppies, but if they're bred and their parents are fighting dogs and they're bred in an environment that's chaotic and they're made to fight and all these things, then you kind of have that innately in you. But otherwise, it's just a puppy. I don't necessarily think, and their mom loves them. And I think it just depends upon the factors as you're growing up and things along that nature. But I mean, even from your background and in my background, it's kind of we don't people then also go the other way of I've seen people do things that I don't like. I've seen behavior that I don't like. I've seen, close family members doing stuff that I don't agree with. I'm going to go the opposite way. So again, I don't know if it can necessarily shape your moral character one way or another, because you might have two identical twins and one's, committing crimes and the other one's a priest. So I think it really depends upon what drives that person too. And I don't think I think that's kind of the X factor, right? Like you can have nature, you can have nurture, but what's the motivation?
Mm. Have you ever heard of the trolley problem?
I have, but I think you should remind everyone for your listeners. So the trolley problem.
So, basically, what I have here is like that. I was gonna ask you explore the classic thought experiment, um, which is the trolley problem, and we're gonna dabble into the complexities of the moral reasoning behind that trolley problem. But to further elaborate on the trolley problem and what that is. The trolley problem is a thought experiment that possesses a fictional scenario where an observer must decide whether to sacrifice one person or to save five. The observer can divert a trolley to kill one person or to keep it on its path and allow it to run over and kill five. The problem was created in 1967 by Oxford moral philosopher Philippa Foot to stimulate discussion about the challenges of resolving moral dilemmas.
Yes.
How do people with different backgrounds and experiences respond to these dilemmas, like based off of what you've seen in the security field?
Um, well, first of all, we try not to run anyone over with anything, because then you go to jail. But how do we deal with it? It again, it does come down to training and experience quite a lot of times. Um, the intent is to not have to make that decision in the security field. The intent is to not have to get to that decision. The intent is, unless someone is holding a gun to your head, there's always a way in and around it. So the first thing you try to do in security is understand what the risk is. Okay, so what could happen? Then you understand the threats, like who might be trying to do these things. And then you try to mitigate as much of it as possible. Like, I'm going to have this person drive this route instead of going through this bad neighborhood, or I am going to implement, these security controls instead of just not having any security controls. So the whole part of my job is to do two things. It's to mitigate risk and to like alleviate anxiety. So I would hopefully have enough foresight to see if I'm going to have a trolley problem come up, um, and mitigate the risk enough where it doesn't come up. I mean, that's the intent, basically.
That's good. That's real good.
Yeah.
Last question: how can
Okay.
we use our understanding of nature and nurture to create a more just and compassionate society?
I think it's empathy. I think empathy is you should start there. Of You can look at someone's behavior, you can know their background, but you don't know that X factor, which is the motivation, right? And you have to believe that most people are inherently good, and you have to believe that most people are inherently trying to do the best they can every day. So if I see a coworker who's like storming around and, slamming stuff around, I'm honestly going to assume like they got caught in traffic or they spilled their coffee on their pants or they had a fight with their spouse that morning. Because I think a lot of what we do is a lot of people, our brains like to jump to conclusions. Our brains like to like fill in the details. Our brains like to be like, well, Joe's being a jerk today, and it's probably because he's just a jerk. And it's like, no, Joe has been fighting with his wife for 6 months. They might be getting a divorce. You know what I mean? Like, these are things we don't know. And I don't think all my coworkers are getting divorced, but I do feel like you have to start with from a place of, what is their regular behavior? How do they regularly interact? Is this a change from that behavior? Um, how do you know them historically? Like, this is new? Like, how do you know them and all this kind of thing? But then also just kind of lead with empathy and assume that people are having a bad day and that you should seek to understand before you seek to judge or criticize or, put up security solutions or, profile somebody. And I think that's probably the most important part is people like to they like to figure things out and be like, oh, this is this. And it's like, well, sometimes it is that and sometimes it's not that. And you have to also be okay, like not always knowing the answer. So
That's real good. That's good. Well,
thank you.
thank you so much for coming in and sharing your questions. Sharing your answers. Is
Yeah,
there
thank
any
you.
questions that you would like to ask me? This is a part of the segment where I give the special guest to ask me questions.
I'm not prepared. So I'm going to turn it back around on you. What do you think is more important, or do you think they're equally important? Or what have you seen in, your life of nature versus nurture? What's your opinion?
Ooh,
Yeah, see, it's not fun when you got to do
so
it.
nature aspect, like the background, it's like it's the scenario of the two kids that come from a home and the dads are drunk and the mom's this and then this and that, and then the one son becomes the drunk and all of those different things, and
Yeah,
the other son just flourishes. And you try to understand how that one individual, despite being in that environment, has not become like the environment. And I feel like that's like me. I come from a very crazy, tumultuous background, but yet I strive every day to be different. And it makes me think, with that nature versus nurture theory, this, what I was subjected to, how is it that my brain is able to operate on a total different level, and strive to want more. But I'm on both sides of that, but I also think that it has a lot to do with what a I don't know, like I don't know. Honestly, I'm gonna be real. I think the TV raised me in a sense, and I think that's where I got a lot of my nurture concepts from, because I
okay.
really believe that the environment I was in was just that. So a lot of the things that actions or some things that I may think of has come from not wanting to look at the environment I was in that was tumultuous and abusive, but looking at this environment on TV and believing that it's more. So
Yeah, and I think that that's part of it too, is I was told very young, like, this is your future, this is what's going to happen. And I was like, nuh-uh, I'm not doing that, and so I decided, like, I don't want this to be my fate because I didn't like the situation. And I'm like, I can do better than this. And so you have to, do it. And I think you're kind of the same way.
oh yes, because I was told when I was young that I was like, I want to be a lawyer. I was like 8 years old. You ain't gonna be no lawyer. You're not gonna be this and that. I'm eventually gonna be a lawyer, but right
Yeah.
now I'm just, and as I get there, I'm getting all these other credentials and understanding. But I'm gonna definitely make it. I realized that recently, I realized this last year, but pain drives me, and that's
Yeah.
not a good thing. Like people be like, depression does this pushes you to do great things, like you're out here being successful. Mine's is pain. Pain motivates me to a whole nother level. Telling me that I can't do something is like, that's hurting. That's hurtful to me. I'm going to prove you by all means necessary that I can do anything that I can put my mind to, and I'm just going to just I'm gonna go all out. That's why some people just like, I'm not down for too long, because then you turn around and be like, how did destiny pull that off?
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I felt like for a long time, anger drove me. but anger is always a surface emotion for something else. And what I realized was anger was really embarrassment and pain. And that's what drove me to. It took me a while to figure that out. But yes, I felt like when I, have something to prove, I can be like laser focused. So yes, I completely agree with you. Well,
That's
thank you.
I mean, so but um yeah, like, but in that I also am learning for myself that you can't have pain, you can't have something unhealthy to drive you to the next level. So
Right.
placing that for something healthier, such as unpacking whatever made you feel any type of way that it made you feel, and realizing that as you heal, that it's opening up another levels for you to heal. So my viewers
Yes.
and listeners, don't let your negative emotions drive you to do anything positive by any means necessary. That's just me putting it out there. Like, you all know I have issues too, but in that I'm a work in progress. But
Yes.
okay, that's all for this episode of Nature versus Nurture, where morality meets reality. A huge thank you to our guest, Kristin Lenardson, for joining us today and sharing her experience on security and morality. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Persperity Podcast on all social media platforms, and subscribe on YouTube, please. Like, comment, please share. And please also subscribe to my YouTube. Please, please, please. It's needed. And don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite social media platform or on my YouTube. I would love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. And also, I will be sending out a form. Well, I'll find some way to put a form out if anybody's inquiring about being on the podcast. Until next time, remember that nature and nurture are both powerful forces that shape who we are. But it's up to each of us to make choices that reflect our values and beliefs. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Kristin, for your time. At this moment, I'm transitioning to my outro music. You can stay in and listen to it. But thank you so much for taking time out of your workday to be on.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.
In the shadows we find our light. Through the struggles we will take flight. Healing hearts and mending minds. Together we'll leave the past behind. Welcome to Persperity Podcast, where hope is found. Voices rising up, breaking new ground. With every story shared, we grow and learn. In this journey of healing, it's our turn. Mindful moments equal prosperous lives.
See you next week.
Hallelujah.
Got even bigger special guest. More to come, 2025. Love you all.